I truly believe in building the plane as you go when it comes to podcasting. So what do I mean by this? No matter how much you plan, how much you outline everything, the mindset of perfection is stopping you from actually executing. If you prioritize this one thing above everything else, your podcast will fail without a doubt. I recently am working with a new client on a really big project, like really big, a whole production media network really big. I think a lot of people have mixed up and mistaken what is going to make your podcast successful. So I wanted to come on here quick and tell you everything that will make you have a failing podcast when you're starting out. I am going to get in a few different things, but just to start out, the number one thing is not getting started. What do I mean by this, by not getting started? After being the lead of production for many top ranking podcasts that are household names and you come across every single day, I truly believe in building the plane as you go when it comes to podcasting. So what do I mean by this? No matter how much you plan, how much you outline everything, the mindset of perfection is stopping you from actually executing. They do say perfection is the enemy of progress, which is so true when it comes to the podcasting world, because people want everything perfect, the perfect lighting, the perfect audio, the perfect camera, everything up to high top quality standards. And meanwhile, that is all great, but all while you're sitting over there, I have a fuzz on me. I'm shutting. After you're thinking about all that stuff, getting your head wrapped up in that, you're not actually worrying about what matters. My advice is scrap all of that, because the best content is content that is done. Content that is published. That is the best kind of content. So when you're starting a podcast, starting any sort of production, the best thing is pick up your phone, tilt it sideways, and start recording. Because why person A is rigging something up on their phone and getting started and building the plane as you go and publishing content, you're over here worrying about, is the lighting too white or too yellow? Like, we don't have time for that, because the best content is done content. And what makes a podcast successful is not the quality of your video, the quality of your audio. It's your content and how you're delivering it. So be like person A. Number two, if you prioritize this one thing above everything else, your podcast will fail without a doubt. And that is spending way too much money on equipment. It is completely so unnecessary when starting out. And it's so unnecessary to get anything but a simple mic off Amazon when you're just starting out. No one has ever purposely listened to a podcast because the audio quality was really good. When have you ever heard of anyone say, let me play you this podcast, the audio quality is so good, it's gonna be amazing? Unless you're a producer like me and you're talking to other producers and showing a mic that you might be interested in, there is literally no one who ever said, wow, let's listen to the Joe Rogan podcast because his mic is so crisp. People listen to the Joe Rogan podcast because of his content, not because of the quality of his mic or his camera or his lighting. So my rule when it comes to prioritization, number one is always your content and how you're delivering it. That's number one. But what you're not prioritizing is the quality of your studio, your lights, camera, action, all that good stuff. You should not be prioritizing. My rule is that you should start off using something like your phone or something like a Riverside FM, which I highly recommend. Use that kind of stuff to record, and even at most get a mic off Amazon, but you do not need to spend more than like $30 on a mic. And even then, you could still use the recording device off your phone. It records fine. So what will make your podcast do well is your content and how you're delivering it, not how crisp your audio is. One more thing that is not going to make your podcast successful is dwelling on the logistics of your podcast setup. I find that people that want to start a podcast aren't worrying about the right things. They're very worried about the whole lights, camera, action. What type of camera do we have? What's the lighting? What's the situation? And you should not be worrying about that when you're starting off at all. I have worked in professional studios, news studios, production studios, And if you go back and look at some of my first episodes, it looks nothing like this. And don't get me wrong, this is not fantastic. I just kind of built this up over time. But guess what? I never did not publish content because I didn't like the way my studio looked. I didn't like the way my audio sounded. I didn't like my lighting. It never stopped me from moving forward and building the plane as you go. My professional opinion, when you're worrying all about the studio, lights, camera, action, I'm gonna call it again, you are giving yourself more work than what it's actually benefiting you. Once again, I'm going back to it. I recommend something day and night like a Riverside FM. It opens up so many doors for you. It works like you're on like a Zoom call or a Google Meet, but better. It gives you a great production for seamless recording and seamless editing. And on top of that, before you even start your show, you have to factor if you are going to have guests on your show or not. If you are not planning on it, this does not apply to you, but most people do end up having guests on at some point or another. So hear me out on this. This is really where lights, camera, action does not matter, because the benefit of all this, what I'm about to get into, completely outweighs your camera that you're getting, whatever fancy camera you're getting. If you have the whole production and all the fancy stuff, whatever, that's great. But when you get so complicated like that, your only option is to have guests come in person. So like that, if you look at my situation right now, and if I had it set up as if it were only in studio with an extremely fancy camera and an extremely expensive mic that could not be portable, I'm going to have to buy double of everything, because now I have a secondary person here. I have to fly them in or tell them to stop over, whatever the situation is. I have to set everything up, get a second camera angle. Not even that, you want a 2-frame shot, so you need another camera. And then you need 2 mics, you need 2 of everything. I know I keep going back to it, but if you do use something like a Riverside FM, which once again, I highly recommend, your guest's location can be limitless, literally anywhere in the world. So now if you have an in-studio versus remote and high quality like Riverside, in person, you are so limited on who you can have on. But if you're on Riverside FM, it opens up so many doors for you. You can record from anywhere and have a seamless recording and editing process. So once again, just with all my years in the podcasting industry, that is everything that will separate you from having a failing podcast to start out with to having a very successful podcast that, as long as you build the plane as you go, stay consistent, and always prioritize your content and how you're delivering it, you are going to have a successful podcast in no time. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.